Hack your brain, rewire your mind to beat laziness, build consistency, and achieve success. Published by Audiobook Academy.
Introduction. A calm mind is one of the rarest forms of strength in the modern world. Pressure has a way of exposing what lives beneath the surface of a person's thinking. In difficult moments, some people panic, react emotionally, and make choices they later regret. Others remain steady, focused, and clear, even when everything around them feels uncertain. The difference is not luck, intelligence, or personality. The difference is mental discipline. Life does not always give us time to prepare for stressful moments. Difficult conversations, financial setbacks, workplace pressure, emotional conflict, unexpected failures, and major decisions often arrive without warning. During those moments, the quality of your thinking becomes the quality of your life. A single emotional decision can create years of consequences, while one calm decision can completely change your future. In this audiobook, we will explore how to train your mind to stay clear under pressure, think wisely during emotional situations, and make better decisions when life becomes difficult. You will learn how to slow down reactive thinking, separate facts from fear, control emotional impulses, recover from setbacks, and build the kind of inner stability that strong leaders and successful people quietly rely on every day. It is about becoming stronger than your emotions when the moment demands clarity. Calmness is not weakness. Calmness is controlled power. It allows you to see solutions while others see problems. It helps you respond instead of react. It gives you the ability to think clearly while pressure pushes everyone else into confusion. The mind can become either your greatest weapon or your greatest weakness. The choice depends on how well you learn to control it. Chapter 1. Stop rushing your decisions. Pressure has a strange effect on the human mind. It convinces you that every decision must be made immediately. It creates urgency even when urgency is unnecessary. In emotional moments, the mind begins to race ahead of reason. Words come out too quickly. Choices are made too fast. Reactions happen before understanding has fully arrived. Then later, after the emotions settle, clarity returns, and regret quietly follows behind it. A calm mind understands something that emotional thinking refuses to accept. Very few decisions in life truly need to be rushed. Yet people destroy relationships, careers, opportunities, and peace of mind because they mistake emotional intensity for importance. The louder the emotion becomes, the more careful your thinking should become. That single habit can save you from years of unnecessary pain. When people feel insulted, rejected, embarrassed, or threatened, the brain shifts into defensive thinking. Instead of asking, "What is the wisest response?" the mind asks, "How do I protect myself right now?" That is why angry emails get sent at midnight. That is why people quit jobs during emotional arguments. That is why friendships end over temporary frustration. The emotional brain wants immediate relief, even if that relief creates long-term damage. Strong decision-making begins with slowing yourself down. Not because you are weak, uncertain, or afraid, but because clarity requires space. Calm people do not give every emotion permission to control their actions. They pause, they breathe, they observe, they allow the emotional storm to pass before deciding what deserves a response and what deserves silence. Brandon Keller learned this lesson during one of the worst weeks of his career. He was a commercial airline mechanic in Minneapolis, known for being dependable and detail-oriented. For nearly 11 years, he had built a strong reputation with his company, but during an overnight inspection shift, a supervisor accused him of missing a critical maintenance step on an aircraft report. The accusation happened in front of several co-workers, and the humiliation hit Brandon hard. He felt disrespected, angry, and betrayed. By the time he drove home that morning, he had already decided he was going to resign. The emotion inside him felt justified. His mind replayed the argument over and over again. He imagined confronting management, exposing the unfair treatment, and walking away for good. Every thought pushed him toward a quick decision, but before sending his resignation email, Brandon forced himself to wait 2 days. He told himself that if quitting was still the right decision after his emotions settled, he could do it then. Those 2 days changed everything. As his anger faded, his thinking became clearer. He spoke calmly with another supervisor and discovered that the inspection error had actually originated from a documentation issue in another department. The accusation against him had been premature. Management later apologized privately for how the situation had been handled. If Brandon had reacted immediately, he would have walked away from a stable career because of a temporary emotional moment. That is the danger of rushed decisions. They often feel powerful in the moment, but destructive over time. Emotion creates tunnel vision. It narrows your perspective until the current feeling becomes the only thing you can see. Calmness widens that perspective again. It allows wisdom to re-enter the room. You do not need to make every decision today. You do not need to answer every criticism immediately. You do not need to react to every emotional impulse your mind creates. Some of the best decisions you will ever make in life will come after you stop yourself from making a worse one too quickly. A calm mind respects timing. It understands that clarity and patience work together. When emotions rise, wise people slow themselves down on purpose. They know that temporary feelings should never be allowed to make permanent decisions. The next time pressure enters your life, resist the urge to react immediately. Give yourself space before responding. Sleep on difficult decisions. Step away from emotional conversations before saying something you cannot take back. The pause may feel uncomfortable at first, but that pause is often where wisdom begins. Your future can change simply by learning not to rush what deserves careful thought. Chapter 2. Question the story in your head. The human mind has a powerful habit of turning uncertainty into stories. When information is incomplete, emotions quickly begin filling the gaps. A delayed phone call becomes rejection. A quiet meeting becomes criticism. A mistake becomes failure. Without realizing it, people often suffer more from the meaning they attach to situations than from the situations themselves. One of the greatest causes of emotional pressure is not reality itself, but the interpretation of reality. The mind creates assumptions, then treats those assumptions as facts. That is why calm thinking is so important. A calm mind questions emotional conclusions before accepting them as truth. Fear has a way of speaking with confidence. It tells you that people are disappointed in you, that opportunities are disappearing, that your future is unstable, or that failure is inevitable. The dangerous part is that these thoughts often sound believable when emotions are high. Stress changes perception, anxiety magnifies problems, insecurity searches for evidence that something is wrong, even when nothing truly is. This is why emotional thinking becomes dangerous during difficult moments. The mind stops observing objectively and starts creating emotional narratives. Once that happens, people begin reacting to imagined problems instead of real ones. Relationships become strained because of assumptions. Careers suffer because of insecurity. Confidence disappears because the mind quietly turns fear into certainty. A calm person learns to pause and ask a simple but powerful question. Do I know this is true, or am I only feeling that it might be true? That question alone can prevent countless emotional mistakes. Alicia Munro learned this lesson during a stressful season in her career. She worked as a luxury hotel sales manager in Scottsdale, Arizona. Her job depended heavily on securing large corporate events and maintaining strong client relationships. For years, she had performed well and earned praise from senior leadership. But during one unusually slow month, several expected bookings were delayed at the same time. Fewer emails arrived, phone calls slowed down, meetings were suddenly cancelled or postponed. At first, Alicia tried not to worry about it. But as the quiet weeks continued, her thoughts began changing. She became convinced that management had lost confidence in her. Every small interaction started feeling suspicious. If a supervisor sounded distracted during a conversation, she interpreted it as disappointment. If a client responded slowly to an email, she assumed she was losing business. Her mind built an entire story around fear, and soon that story started affecting her behavior. She became tense during meetings. Her confidence dropped during client calls. Instead of thinking clearly, she spent hours replaying conversations in her head and searching for signs that her career was falling apart. The pressure she felt was real, but the conclusions she reached were not. One evening, after weeks of anxiety, Alicia sat down and forced herself to examine the actual facts instead of her emotional assumptions. She reviewed hotel industry reports, past booking cycles, and regional business trends. What she discovered immediately changed her perspective. The slowdown affecting her work was happening across the entire hospitality market that season. Several nearby hotels were experiencing the same decline due to temporary economic uncertainty and delayed corporate travel budgets. Her situation was not personal at all. The moment she separated facts from feelings, her mind became calmer. Her confidence returned because reality finally replaced imagination. Instead of reacting emotionally, she adjusted strategically. Within 2 months, bookings recovered and her performance stabilized again. The lesson is simple but powerful. Feelings are real, but feelings are not always accurate. Fear can create stories that have no connection to reality. A calm mind learns not to believe every thought it produces. They can reveal stress, exhaustion, insecurity, or unresolved problems. But emotions should be examined carefully, not obeyed automatically. Wisdom begins when you stop treating every emotional reaction as objective truth. Many people live under unnecessary pressure because they never question the stories running inside their minds. They assume the worst before gathering evidence. They predict failure before taking action. They interpret temporary setbacks as permanent disasters. Over time, those mental habits slowly weaken confidence and clarity. Calm thinkers operate differently. They slow down emotional conclusions. They ask for evidence. They separate facts from assumptions. They refuse to let fear make decisions on behalf of reason. The next time your mind begins creating negative stories, pause before accepting them. Ask yourself what you actually know for certain. Look at the situation objectively. Remove emotion from the facts as much as possible. You may discover that the problem is not nearly as large as your emotions first convinced you it was. A clear mind is not built by eliminating difficulty from life. It is built by learning to see reality accurately, even when emotions try to distort it. Chapter 3. Bring your mind back to the present. A restless mind rarely sees life clearly. It constantly drifts backward into regret or forward into fear. One moment it is replaying old mistakes, embarrassing conversations, and painful memories. The next moment it is imagining future problems that may never happen. Meanwhile, the present moment quietly disappears beneath all that mental noise. Pressure becomes heavier when the mind loses contact with the present. Anxiety is often nothing more than the mind trying to live in tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. Regret is the mind trying to rewrite yesterday even though yesterday is gone. In both cases, mental energy is wasted on places where no action can be taken. Calmness returns when attention comes back to what can actually be controlled right now. This is one of the greatest hidden secrets behind clear thinking. A focused mind is a present mind. The moment your attention becomes fully grounded in what is directly in front of you, confusion begins to weaken, problems become smaller, decisions become simpler, emotions become easier to manage. The present moment has a stabilizing effect on the human mind because it removes the endless mental chaos created by imagined futures and repeated pasts. They carry conversations from last week into today. They mentally rehearse disasters that have not happened. Even during calm moments, their minds remain crowded with unfinished thoughts and imagined scenarios. Over time, this constant mental movement creates emotional fatigue. The body may be physically present, but the mind never truly rests. A calm mind understands that life can only be handled one moment at a time, not 5 years at a time, not 20 possible outcomes at a time, just one step, one decision, one conversation, one action at a time. The mind becomes stronger when it learns how to stay where the body already is. Derek Lawson discovered this lesson during some of the most stressful moments of his life. He was a firefighter lieutenant in Charlotte, North Carolina, responsible for leading emergency response teams during dangerous situations. His work demanded fast decisions, emotional control, and steady leadership under pressure. But despite his experience, Derek struggled privately with intense anxiety before major emergency calls. Every time the alarm sounded for a serious incident, his mind immediately jumped ahead. During the drive to a fire scene, he imagined worst-case outcomes before arriving. He worried about injuries, mistakes, equipment failures, and whether his team would handle the situation correctly. By the time he stepped out of the truck, his thoughts were already racing far beyond the actual moment in front of him. The pressure became mentally exhausting. Even on his days off, he found himself replaying previous emergencies and imagining future disasters. Sleep became difficult, his concentration weakened, He felt emotionally drained long before each shift even began. One older captain eventually noticed the tension in Derek and gave him simple advice that changed the way he approached pressure forever. He told him, "Stop trying to survive the entire fire before it even starts. Handle the next task in front of you." At first, the advice sounded too simple to matter, but Derek slowly began applying it during emergency calls. Instead of mentally jumping ahead to every possible problem, he trained himself to focus only on the immediate responsibility in front of him. If he was checking equipment, he focused only on that. If he was giving instructions to his crew, he focused only on that conversation. If he was entering a building, he focused only on the next safe step. His mind became calmer during emergencies, not because the situations became easier, but because his attention stopped fighting imaginary futures. By staying mentally present, his confidence grew stronger. His decisions improved because his thinking was no longer divided between reality and fear. This is an important lesson for anyone facing pressure in life. The mind becomes overwhelmed when it tries to carry too much at once. Clarity returns when attention narrows back to the present moment. You do not need to solve your entire future today. You only need to handle the next decision wisely. The present moment is where calmness lives. It is where solutions appear. It is where clear thinking becomes possible again. A distracted mind creates emotional chaos because it constantly drags itself into places it cannot control. A disciplined mind learns to return its focus again and again to what matters now. When anxiety begins pulling your thoughts into the future, pause and bring yourself back to the present. Focus on the next conversation, the next task, the next step. When regret begins dragging you backward into old mistakes, remind yourself that the past cannot be changed through overthinking. Life is always happening in the current moment, never inside mental replay. A calm mind is not a mind that never thinks about the future or reflects on the past. Chapter 4. Protect your mind under pressure. Pressure changes people. It changes the way they speak, think, listen, and behave. Calm individuals suddenly become impatient. Intelligent people make careless mistakes. Confident people begin doubting themselves. Under stress, the mind often loses access to its best qualities. That is why protecting your mental clarity during difficult moments becomes one of the most valuable skills you can develop in life. A pressured mind does not think clearly because survival emotions begin taking control. The brain becomes focused on urgency instead of wisdom. It rushes toward immediate relief rather than long-term solutions. In that state, people often confuse emotional intensity with important action. They believe they must solve everything immediately. They begin overthinking small problems, reacting emotionally to setbacks, and making decisions from exhaustion instead of clarity. One of the greatest misunderstandings about pressure is the belief that strong people never feel it. The truth is that everyone experiences pressure. The difference is that mentally disciplined people know how to protect their thinking while pressure is present. They understand that difficult moments require steadiness, not panic. They know that stress is dangerous, not only because of the external situation, but because of what stress can do to the quality of their judgment. A calm mind under pressure is powerful because it remains objective. It sees reality without exaggeration. It focuses on priorities instead of distractions. While emotional minds become chaotic, calm minds become deliberate. This is why great leaders, skilled surgeons, experienced pilots, and successful negotiators train themselves to remain composed during high-pressure situations. They know that clear thinking is often the difference between success and failure. The problem is that pressure rarely announces itself gently. It arrives suddenly through deadlines, unexpected conflict, financial strain, family problems, health concerns, or emotional disappointment. When several stressful situations appear at once, the mind can easily become overloaded. Thoughts begin racing faster than the situation itself. Small problems start feeling enormous because the nervous system remains constantly activated. Monica Hayes understood this struggle very well. She worked as a senior supply chain coordinator for a manufacturing company in Detroit. Her job required constant organization, communication, and problem-solving. On normal days, she handled responsibilities efficiently and calmly, but during one particularly difficult quarter, her company faced severe production delays, staffing shortages, and shipment disruptions all at the same time. The pressure inside the office quickly intensified, deadlines tightened, managers demanded faster results. Emails arrived non-stop throughout the day. Monica began waking up already feeling anxious before work even started. Once she sat down at her desk each morning, her mind immediately entered survival mode. At first she believed working faster would solve the problem, so she pushed herself harder and harder. She skipped lunch breaks, answered emails impulsively, and tried handling multiple problems at once without stopping. But instead of becoming more productive, her thinking became scattered. She forgot important details. She sent incorrect shipment approvals. She misunderstood instructions during meetings. Every mistake created even more pressure, which caused even more mental exhaustion. What frustrated Monica most was that she knew she was capable of better work. She was experienced, intelligent, and hard-working, yet under pressure, she barely recognized herself. The stress was slowly stealing her ability to think clearly. One afternoon, after making another avoidable mistake during a tense meeting, Monica stepped outside the building during her break and sat alone in her car. For the first time in weeks, she stopped trying to outrun the pressure and honestly looked at what was happening to her mentally. She realized the problem was not only the workload itself. The real problem was that she had allowed stress to completely control the condition of her mind. That realization changed her approach. Instead of forcing herself to move faster, she began building small mental reset routines throughout the day. Before entering meetings, she paused for 1 full minute to slow her breathing and organize her thoughts. She stopped checking emails every few seconds and focused on completing one task carefully before moving to the next. During stressful conversations, she deliberately slowed her speaking pace instead of matching everyone else's urgency. None of these changes removed the pressure around her immediately, but they protected the quality of her thinking while the pressure continued. Within weeks, her concentration improved, mistakes decreased, her confidence returned because her mind finally had room to function clearly again. To calm, this is an important lesson to remember. Pressure is not only an external experience, it becomes dangerous when it invades your thinking and disrupts your judgment. Protecting your mind means refusing to let stressful moments destroy your clarity. It means slowing yourself down when the world around you speeds up emotionally. When pressure enters your life, your first responsibility is not panic. Your first responsibility is protecting your ability to think. A calm mind can solve problems that an overwhelmed mind cannot even understand clearly. The world will always contain stressful seasons. Deadlines will exist. Unexpected problems will appear. Difficult people will test your patience, but your greatest advantage during those moments will never be speed, panic, or emotional intensity. Your greatest advantage will always be your ability to remain mentally steady while others lose control. A calm mind under pressure is not an accident. It is a discipline, and like every discipline, it grows stronger every time you practice it. Chapter 5. Respond calmly instead of reacting emotionally. Emotional reactions are fast. Calm responses are intentional. That difference may seem small in the moment, but over time it changes the entire direction of a person's life. One careless reaction can damage trust, destroy opportunities, or create pain that lasts for years. A calm response, on the other hand, creates stability, respect, and clarity even during conflict. The problem is that emotional reactions often feel justified while they are happening. Anger feels powerful, defensiveness feels necessary, frustration feels honest. In heated moments, the mind convinces you that reacting emotionally is the same thing as standing up for yourself. But strength is not measured by how quickly you react. True strength is measured by how well you remain in control of yourself when emotions rise. It allows circumstances, people, and emotions to dictate behavior automatically. Someone says something offensive, and anger immediately takes over. A problem appears, and panic begins instantly. A disappointment arrives, and frustration spreads into every conversation and decision afterward. In those moments, the person is no longer choosing their response consciously. Their emotions are choosing for them. Calm people still feel anger, stress, disappointment, and frustration. They are human like everyone else. The difference is that they do not immediately surrender control to those emotions. They create space between feeling and action. Inside that space lives wisdom. This is one of the most valuable disciplines a person can develop because life constantly tests emotional control. Difficult people will challenge your patience. Unexpected problems will interrupt your plans. Criticism will hurt your pride. Pressure will push against your emotions. The question is never whether difficult moments will happen. The real question is whether you will react emotionally or respond wisely when they do. Trevor Sinclair learned this lesson the hard way. He worked as a warehouse operations supervisor in Kansas City for a large distribution company. His job involved managing shipment schedules, inventory coordination, and a team of over 30 employees working under constant deadlines. Trevor was intelligent, hard-working, and deeply committed to keeping operations running smoothly. But he had one major weakness that slowly began damaging both his leadership and his reputation. Whenever problems appeared, Trevor reacted emotionally. If a shipment arrived late, he exploded in frustration. If employees made mistakes, his voice immediately became aggressive. During stressful days, even small inconveniences triggered sharp responses. At first, he convinced himself that his reactions were necessary to maintain discipline and efficiency. He believed his anger showed leadership strength, but over time, the atmosphere inside the warehouse changed. Employees stopped communicating openly around him because they feared his reactions. Minor problems were hidden instead of discussed. Team morale weakened. Even experienced workers became tense whenever Trevor walked onto the floor during stressful situations. One afternoon, a major shipping delay created chaos across the warehouse. Orders were behind schedule, customers were calling constantly, and pressure from upper management intensified by the hour. During a tense meeting with his team, Trevor lost control completely. He blamed employees publicly, slammed paperwork onto a table, and stormed out of the room in anger. The silence afterward said more than any argument could have. For the first time, Trevor saw the emotional exhaustion on his employees' faces. He realized his reactions were not solving problems, they were creating new ones. That moment stayed with him long after the meeting ended. A few days later, one senior employee privately told Trevor something honest but difficult to hear. He said, "The pressure isn't what's breaking people here. It's how they feel around you when pressure happens." Those words forced Trevor to confront something uncomfortable. He had spent years believing external problems were the source of chaos, while ignoring the emotional chaos he personally added to every stressful situation. From that point forward, Trevor made a deliberate decision to change how he responded under pressure. He started slowing himself down before speaking during tense moments. When frustration rose, he paused instead of reacting immediately. He asked questions before assigning blame. He focused on solving problems instead of emotionally releasing stress onto everyone around him. The transformation did not happen overnight, but it changed his entire leadership style. Employees became more open, communication improved, and the workplace atmosphere became calmer even during difficult periods. Most importantly, Trevor himself felt mentally lighter because he was no longer exhausting himself through constant emotional reactions. This is an important truth many people overlook. Emotional reactions may provide temporary release, but they rarely provide long-term solutions. In fact, uncontrolled reactions often multiply the original problem. Calm responses, however, create clarity. They protect relationships, preserve respect, and allow better decisions to emerge. The next time you feel strong emotions rising inside you, pause before reacting. Ask yourself whether your response will improve the situation or simply release emotion temporarily. Remember that not every feeling deserves immediate expression. Some emotions need understanding before action. A calm response is not weakness, it is emotional maturity under pressure. Anyone can react emotionally when life becomes difficult, but the people who truly lead their lives well are the ones who remain steady enough to choose wisdom over impulse. Chapter 6. Create silence before your mind burns out. Noise has become one of the most accepted forms of exhaustion in modern life. Phones vibrate constantly, notifications interrupt attention every few minutes, conversations continue without pause, screens compete endlessly for mental space. Even moments that appear quiet are often filled with internal noise, racing thoughts, worries, unfinished conversations, and constant stimulation. The mind rarely gets an opportunity to fully rest. A calm mind cannot survive for long without periods of silence. Mental clarity requires recovery just as the body requires sleep. Yet many people spend years overstimulating their minds without realizing the damage it creates. They move from one distraction to another, from one obligation to the next, until their thinking becomes emotionally crowded and mentally exhausted. When the mind is always occupied, there is no space left for reflection. Important thoughts remain buried beneath endless activity. Emotional fatigue quietly builds in the background. Over time, people begin feeling irritated, impatient, mentally scattered, and emotionally drained without fully understanding why. Silence is not empty. Silence is restorative. It gives the nervous system a chance to slow down. It allows emotions to settle naturally. It creates space for perspective to return. Some of the clearest decisions you will ever make in life will happen during moments when external noise finally disappears long enough for your mind to breathe again. This is why emotionally disciplined people protect quiet time carefully. They understand that constant input weakens concentration and emotional stability. A calm mind needs moments without pressure, interruption, or stimulation. Without those moments, the mind eventually begins operating in survival mode rather than clarity. Many people believe burnout only comes from working too hard, but mental exhaustion often comes from never truly disconnecting. The brain remains active all day and long into the night. Even while resting physically, the mind continues processing conversations, scrolling through information, replaying problems, and anticipating tomorrow's responsibilities. The body may stop moving, but the mind never slows down. Jenna Whitmore experienced this kind of exhaustion for years. She worked as a criminal defense paralegal in Philadelphia, handling demanding legal cases that required constant organization and attention to detail. Her workdays were filled with phone calls, urgent emails, legal deadlines, and emotionally intense client interactions. Outside of work, her life remained equally noisy. She checked notifications constantly, answered messages late into the night, and filled every quiet moment with television, podcasts, or social media. At first, Jenna believed she was simply staying productive and connected, but over time, something inside her began changing. Her concentration weakened. Small inconveniences irritated her more than before. She found herself mentally exhausted even after weekends. During conversations, her attention drifted easily. She struggled to focus deeply because her mind had become conditioned to constant interruption. The worst part was the feeling that she could never fully relax. Even when sitting quietly at home, her thoughts continued racing. Her mind felt crowded from the moment she woke up until the moment she went to sleep. One evening after an especially overwhelming workday, Jenna drove home in complete silence because her phone battery had died unexpectedly. No music played. No podcasts filled the background. For nearly 30 minutes she sat alone with nothing but her thoughts. At first the silence felt uncomfortable. Her mind kept searching for stimulation. But after several minutes, something surprising happened. She began feeling mentally lighter. That drive made her realize how rarely she allowed herself true silence. Slowly, Jenna began making small changes. She stopped checking her phone immediately after waking up. She created short periods during the day without screens, conversations, or background noise. Sometimes, she simply sat quietly with a notebook or walked alone without headphones. At night, she began turning off digital distractions earlier so her mind could gradually slow down before sleep. None of these habits were dramatic, but the effects became powerful over time. Her concentration improved. Emotional reactions became less intense. She started thinking more clearly because her mind was no longer constantly overstimulated. Silence gave her something she had been missing for years: mental space. A noisy life creates a noisy mind, and a noisy mind struggles to think clearly under pressure. When the brain never gets time to recover, even small problems begin feeling overwhelming. Emotional control weakens because the nervous system remains overstimulated for too long. Silence helps restore balance. It allows your thoughts to slow down naturally instead of being forced constantly from one thing to another. In silence, perspective returns. Priorities become clearer. Emotional tension softens. Solutions often appear quietly after the mind finally stops fighting for attention. You do not need to escape the world completely to protect your mind, but you do need moments where your attention is no longer being pulled in every direction. You need time to think without interruption, time to reflect without noise, time to exist without constant stimulation. A calm mind is not built only during moments of pressure, it is built during moments of quiet. The ability to remain steady during chaos often begins with learning how to sit peacefully in silence first. Chapter 7. Face fear before fear controls you. Fear has a quiet way of taking control long before a person realizes it has happened. It rarely arrives looking dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it disguises itself as hesitation, overthinking, procrastination, or the need to wait for the right time. Other times it appears as constant worry, endless preparation, or avoidance disguised as caution. Yet underneath all those behaviors, fear is often the real force making decisions. A fearful mind struggles to think clearly because fear narrows perspective. It trains attention toward danger, failure, embarrassment, rejection, and uncertainty. Once fear takes control of the mind, possibilities begin disappearing. Opportunities look risky instead of exciting. Challenges feel threatening instead of meaningful. Even small decisions become emotionally exhausting because the mind constantly searches for what could go wrong. This is why fear becomes so dangerous under pressure. It does not simply create discomfort, it distorts judgment. Fear convinces people to abandon opportunities they are fully capable of handling. It keeps intelligent individuals trapped in hesitation for years. In many cases, the greatest damage fear causes is not failure itself, but the life people never fully live because fear quietly controlled their decisions. A calm mind understands something important about fear. Fear grows larger when avoided and smaller when examined honestly. The human imagination has a tendency to exaggerate unknown outcomes. The mind creates worst-case scenarios and then emotionally reacts to them as if they are already happening. But when fear is faced directly, it often loses much of its power. Many people spend years trying to eliminate fear completely before taking action. But courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage means refusing to let fear become the final authority over your choices. Calmness helps make that possible because a calm mind can examine fear logically instead of emotionally. Colin Mercer spent years trapped inside fear without fully admitting it to himself. He owned a small neighborhood printing company in Tampa, Florida, which he had inherited from his father nearly a decade earlier. Colin worked hard, treated customers well, and maintained a stable business. But despite opportunities to grow, he kept the company exactly the same year after year. Friends and business contacts often encouraged him to expand. Commercial contracts were available. New equipment could increase production significantly. Several nearby businesses had even approached him about partnerships. Yet every time an opportunity appeared, Colin found reasons to delay. He told himself the market was uncertain. He convinced himself expansion was too risky. He insisted he needed more time to prepare. The truth was much simpler. Colin was deeply afraid of failure. He feared losing money. He feared disappointing employees who depended on him. He feared making a major decision that could damage the business his father had spent years building. The fear became so normal in his thinking that he stopped questioning it. Avoiding growth began feeling safer than risking mistakes. As the years passed, however, something else began happening. Smaller competitors started modernizing their services while Colin remained stuck. Revenue growth slowed. Customers gradually moved toward businesses offering faster and more advanced solutions. The very fear that had once convinced him to avoid risk was now quietly creating a different kind of danger. One evening, after reviewing another disappointing financial quarter, Colin sat alone in his office long after closing time. For the first time in years, he stopped avoiding the deeper question inside his mind. He asked himself honestly, "What exactly am I afraid of?" That question changed everything. As he examined his fears carefully, he realized most of them were vague emotional assumptions rather than logical realities. He had never actually calculated the risks properly. He had never explored gradual expansion options. He had simply allowed fear to create a permanent state of hesitation. Over the next several weeks, Colin began approaching his fears differently. He spoke with financial advisors, researched manageable expansion strategies, and studied businesses that had grown successfully without reckless decisions. The more information he gathered, the more his fear lost its emotional grip. Eventually, Colin made the decision to modernize part of his operation and slowly expand services. The transition was challenging at times, but it also opened new opportunities that strengthened the business significantly. Looking back later, Colin realized something powerful. The years spent avoiding fear had been more damaging than the risks he was afraid to take. Fear often creates imaginary prisons inside the mind. It convinces people they are protecting themselves when they are actually limiting themselves. It tells them to wait longer, think harder, and avoid discomfort. Meanwhile, life quietly moves forward without them. This does not mean every fear should be ignored recklessly. Some fears exist for good reason. Calm thinking always includes wisdom, preparation, and careful judgment. But many fears become exaggerated because they are never examined honestly. The mind treats uncertainty as danger simply because it lacks clarity. The next time fear begins controlling your thinking, pause and look directly at it. Ask yourself what specifically you are afraid of. Separate emotional imagination from actual reality. You may discover that the fear inside your mind is much larger than the situation itself. A calm mind does not eliminate fear completely. It simply refuses to surrender leadership to it. Fear may still speak, but calmness decides which voice deserves to be followed. Chapter 8. Stay calm long enough to see the solution. Panic has a way of shrinking the mind. The moment people become emotionally overwhelmed, their thinking narrows dramatically. Attention moves away from possibilities and locks onto problems. Small obstacles suddenly feel impossible. Decisions become rushed. Mistakes multiply because the mind is no longer observing clearly. Under pressure, emotional chaos often blinds people to solutions that were visible all along. This is one of the hidden powers of calmness. A calm mind sees what a panicked mind misses. During difficult situations, many people become so emotionally focused on what is going wrong that they lose the ability to notice what could still go right. They stare at obstacles until obstacles become the only thing they can see. Fear speeds up the mind while clarity requires steadiness. That is why calmness is not passive. Calmness is strategic awareness. Think about how often problems become worse simply because people panic too early. A misunderstanding turns into conflict because nobody pauses long enough to listen clearly. A business challenge becomes a disaster because emotional decisions replace patient thinking. Even in personal relationships, emotional reactions often hide simple solutions that could have been discovered through calm communication. It allows people to step back mentally instead of becoming trapped emotionally inside the problem itself. This is important because solutions rarely appear inside emotional chaos. Solutions appear when the mind becomes quiet enough to observe carefully. One reason calm people perform so well under pressure is that they conserve mental energy. While others waste attention on panic, blame, or emotional reactions, calm individuals stay focused on understanding the situation clearly. They ask better questions. They observe details more carefully. They remain mentally flexible instead of emotionally frozen. This ability becomes especially valuable during unexpected problems because pressure often creates confusion first and clarity second. People who react emotionally too quickly usually make the confusion worse. People who remain calm long enough often discover opportunities hidden inside the situation. Brianna Cole learned this lesson during one of the most stressful moments of her professional career. She worked as an event logistics coordinator in Las Vegas, responsible for organizing large corporate conferences and business events. Her work required constant planning, scheduling, and coordination between vendors, venues, and clients. Most events followed carefully prepared systems, but one particular conference tested her in ways she had never experienced before. The event involved several hundred executives attending a national business leadership summit at a major hotel. Months of preparation had gone into the conference. Speakers were scheduled, presentations were organized, and every detail had been planned carefully. But only hours before the event began, a serious technical failure disrupted the hotel's primary conference ballroom. Audio systems stopped working, presentation screens malfunctioned, and several connected systems shut down unexpectedly. The atmosphere changed immediately. Staff members began rushing in every direction. Vendors blamed each other. Hotel managers panicked over the potential disaster. Clients demanded answers. Within minutes, the entire environment became emotionally chaotic. Brianna felt the pressure instantly. Her heart raced as people surrounded her with questions and frustrations. Everyone wanted immediate solutions. For a moment, she felt herself mentally spiraling into panic along with everyone else. But then she caught herself. Instead of reacting emotionally, Brianna stepped away from the noise for less than 2 minutes and forced herself to slow down mentally. She realized that panic was consuming everyone's attention so completely that nobody was actually evaluating the full situation clearly. Once her mind settled, she began looking carefully at the available options instead of obsessing over the failure itself. That was when she noticed something important. Another conference space on a lower floor of the hotel was sitting unused because a separate event had cancelled earlier that morning. The room was smaller, but with a few layout adjustments and staggered presentation scheduling, it could still accommodate the conference successfully. The solution had been available the entire time, but emotional chaos prevented anyone from seeing it. Brianna quickly reorganized the schedule, coordinated the transition with staff, and informed the clients calmly and confidently. The conference moved forward with minimal disruption. Later that evening, several executives personally thanked her for remaining composed while everyone else panicked. What made the difference was not extraordinary intelligence or luck, it was mental steadiness. Brianna stayed calm long enough to think clearly, while others allowed emotion to overwhelm their judgment. This lesson applies far beyond professional crises. In everyday life, people often lose clarity because they become emotionally consumed too quickly. They panic before fully understanding the situation. They assume failure before exploring possibilities. They react emotionally before allowing perspective to return. It slows down emotional noise, so observation becomes possible again. Sometimes the answer is already there, waiting quietly beneath the panic. The next time life places pressure on you, resist the urge to emotionally collapse into the problem immediately. Pause long enough to observe clearly. Ask yourself what you may be missing. Look at the situation from a wider perspective, instead of through emotional urgency. Many problems become manageable the moment the mind becomes calm enough to see beyond fear. The solution may not always appear instantly, but clarity almost never arrives while panic is in control. Chapter 9. Recover quickly after mistakes and setbacks. Every person experiences failure. Every person makes mistakes, faces disappointment, loses opportunities, and goes through moments that damage confidence. No life moves forward without setbacks. Yet what separates mentally strong people from emotionally fragile ones is not the absence of difficulty. The difference is recovery. Some people make one mistake and mentally carry it for years. A failed relationship convinces them they are unworthy of love. A career setback convinces them they are incapable of success. One embarrassing moment becomes permanent proof of personal weakness inside their minds. Instead of recovering, they emotionally attach themselves to the failure and slowly allow it to shape their identity. Failure may hurt confidence for a season, but it does not need to destroy direction. Mistakes are part of growth, not evidence that growth is impossible. The ability to recover mentally after disappointment is one of the most important forms of emotional strength a person can develop. Pressure becomes dangerous when people lose perspective after failure. Emotional thinking begins exaggerating the meaning of the setback. The mind turns one bad experience into a prediction about the future. Instead of saying, "This situation went badly," people begin thinking, "Everything is falling apart." That mental shift creates emotional paralysis. Recovery begins the moment you stop treating a temporary setback like a permanent life sentence. A calm person does not ignore failure or pretend pain does not exist. Calmness is not denial. Calmness is the ability to remain emotionally steady enough to learn, adapt, and move forward, instead of collapsing mentally. Strong minds bend during difficult seasons, but they do not break permanently. Nathaniel Pierce struggled deeply with this lesson early in his career. He was a young architect working for a respected design firm in Denver. Nathaniel was ambitious, creative, and highly driven to prove himself professionally. After years of hard work, he finally received an opportunity that felt career-defining. His firm selected him to lead an important presentation for a major commercial development project that could bring significant recognition to both him and the company. For weeks, Nathaniel prepared obsessively. He refined every design detail, rehearsed every presentation point, and convinced himself that this meeting could change his future. The pressure he placed on himself became enormous because he emotionally connected his entire self-worth to the outcome. But when the day finally arrived, things went badly. Technical problems interrupted part of the presentation. Nathaniel became visibly nervous during questions from investors. Several key concerns about the project remained unanswered. A few weeks later, the firm learned that the contract had gone to another company. The disappointment hit Nathaniel harder than anyone around him realized. On the surface, he remained professional, but internally he felt devastated. His confidence collapsed almost overnight. Every mistake from the presentation replayed constantly inside his mind. He became convinced that he had embarrassed himself permanently and damaged his future career opportunities. At work, he started withdrawing from important discussions. He second-guessed his ideas before sharing them. Even small assignments suddenly created anxiety because his mind remained trapped inside that failed presentation. Instead of recovering from the setback, he emotionally relived it every day. One senior architect at the firm eventually noticed the change in Nathaniel's behavior and invited him to lunch. During their conversation, the older architect shared something that shifted Nathaniel's perspective completely. He told him, "You think this failure defines your career because you're standing too close to it. In 10 years, this will look like one small moment, not the whole story." That sentence stayed with Nathaniel. For the first time, he realized he had allowed one painful experience to completely distort his perspective. He had treated a professional setback as evidence of personal inadequacy instead of seeing it as part of growth. Slowly, Nathaniel began rebuilding mentally. He reviewed the presentation honestly without emotionally attacking himself. He identified areas where he could improve communication and preparation. Instead of avoiding difficult opportunities, he accepted smaller presentations to regain confidence gradually. Over time, his emotional resilience strengthened because he stopped fearing mistakes as permanent disasters. Years later, Nathaniel became one of the firm's most trusted project leaders, not because he avoided failure, but because he learned how to recover from it without losing himself emotionally. Life will not always go according to plan. You will disappoint yourself sometimes. Other people may criticize you unfairly. Opportunities may disappear unexpectedly, but your future is shaped less by the setback itself and more by your response afterward. Many people suffer twice after failure, first from the actual event and then from the emotional story they create around it afterward. They keep replaying the pain until it becomes part of their identity. Calmness interrupts that cycle. It allows you to step back, regain perspective, and continue moving forward wisely. A setback does not become dangerous because it happened. It becomes dangerous when you emotionally decide it means you should stop trying altogether. A calm mind understands that recovery is part of success. Strong people are not people who never fall. They are people who know how to rise again without allowing temporary pain to permanently harden their thinking. Chapter 10. Control your emotions before they control you. Emotions are powerful servants but dangerous leaders. They influence decisions, shape behavior, affect relationships, and often determine how people respond to pressure. Joy can inspire action. Fear can create hesitation. Anger can destroy trust within seconds. Sadness can drain motivation quietly over time. Emotions are part of being human, but problems begin when emotions gain complete control over the mind. Many people spend years believing emotional control means suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. But emotional discipline is not about becoming cold or emotionless. It is about learning how to experience emotions without allowing them to dominate your actions. A calm mind feels deeply while still thinking clearly. This distinction matters because emotional reactions often create consequences that logic alone would never choose. People say things during anger that damage relationships permanently. They make financial decisions from fear. They walk away from opportunities because insecurity becomes louder than reason. In emotional moments, temporary feelings often create permanent outcomes. One of the greatest signs of maturity is the ability to pause long enough for wisdom to speak before emotion takes over completely. Calm people understand that emotions are signals, not commands. They listen to what they feel without automatically obeying every impulse those feelings create. The difficulty is that emotions move quickly. They rise suddenly and demand immediate expression. Anger wants release. Fear wants escape. Frustration wants reaction. In those moments, emotional control requires awareness. Without awareness, emotions quietly begin controlling speech, behavior, and decision-making before a person even realizes it. Uncontrolled emotions rarely stay isolated. They spread into other areas of life. Stress from work enters conversations at home. Personal disappointment affects professional judgment. Anxiety influences relationships. A single emotional burden, when unmanaged, can slowly shape an entire atmosphere around a person. Elise Harper learned this lesson during one of the busiest periods of her life. She owned a growing bakery chain in Austin, Texas, known for its high-quality pastries and strong local customer base. Elise had built the business through years of hard work, long hours, and personal sacrifice. By all outward appearances, she was successful, but privately, the pressure inside her life was becoming overwhelming. The business was expanding quickly, staffing responsibilities increased constantly, and financial pressures were growing behind the scenes. At the same time, several personal challenges outside work added even more emotional strain. Elise barely gave herself time to rest mentally. She carried stress everywhere she went without realizing how much it was affecting her behavior. Inside the bakery, employees began noticing changes in her attitude. Small mistakes irritated her more than before. Minor delays triggered sharp responses. Conversations that once felt warm became tense and impatient. Even loyal employees started feeling nervous around her because they never knew what emotional version of Elise they would encounter on stressful days. The difficult part was that Elise did not see herself as emotionally out of control. In her mind, she was simply exhausted and under pressure. But emotions do not need to explode dramatically to create damage. Sometimes emotional control is lost slowly through constant irritation, impatience, and tension that quietly affects every interaction. One afternoon, a longtime employee accidentally prepared a large catering order incorrectly during an especially busy weekend. The mistake created financial loss and delayed deliveries. Frustrated and emotionally overwhelmed, Elise reacted harshly in front of several staff members. The employee became visibly embarrassed, and the atmosphere inside the bakery turned silent immediately. Later that evening, Elise sat alone in her office after closing time, replaying the situation in her mind. Deep down, she realized her reaction had not come only from the catering mistake itself. It came from weeks of accumulated stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and emotional pressure she had failed to manage properly. The employee simply became the nearest target for emotions she had been carrying far too long. That realization became a turning point for her. Instead of continuing to ignore her emotional state, Elise began paying closer attention to what was happening inside her mind before those emotions spilled into her actions. She created small routines to calm herself during stressful moments. Before responding to problems, she forced herself to pause and breathe instead of reacting instantly. She also began separating temporary emotional stress from the actual situation in front of her. Slowly, the environment around her changed. Employees became more comfortable communicating openly again. Problems were handled more calmly. Most importantly, Elise herself began feeling mentally lighter because she was no longer allowing emotional overload to control every interaction. This is an important truth many people never fully learn. Uncontrolled emotions do not stay contained inside the mind. They eventually affect conversations, decisions, relationships, leadership, and personal peace. Emotional discipline protects not only your thinking, but also the people around you. The goal is not to eliminate emotion completely. Emotions provide valuable insight into your inner condition. They reveal stress, pain, excitement, disappointment, and desire. But emotions should inform your thinking, not dominate it. A calm mind listens carefully to emotions while still allowing wisdom to make the final decision. The next time strong emotions rise inside you, pause before reacting automatically. Ask yourself whether the emotion matches the reality of the moment or whether deeper stress may be influencing your response. Learn to recognize emotions early before they begin controlling your behavior unconsciously. A calm life is not built by avoiding emotions. It is built by learning how to carry emotions responsibly without allowing them to lead your mind wherever they choose. Chapter 11. Protect your peace from negative influences. The human mind is deeply affected by its environment. Thoughts, attitudes, conversations, and emotional energy from other people quietly shape the way a person sees life over time. Spend enough time around fear, and fear begins feeling normal. Spend enough time around constant anger, negativity, or hopelessness, and the mind slowly absorbs those emotional patterns without even noticing. This is why protecting your peace is not selfish. It is necessary for mental clarity. Many people underestimate how much emotional environments influence their thinking. They believe their mindset exists independently from the people around them, but attitudes are contagious. Emotional energy spreads quietly through conversations, habits, expectations, and repeated exposure. Negative environments slowly train the mind to expect problems, focus on limitations, and emotionally prepare for disappointment. A calm mind becomes difficult to maintain when surrounded constantly by emotional chaos. This does not mean avoiding every difficult person or pretending life should always feel positive. Every relationship experiences hard moments. Every workplace faces stress, but there is a difference between temporary difficulty and environments built around chronic negativity. Some people live in constant complaint, criticism, gossip, blame, and pessimism. They search for problems in every opportunity. They predict failure before effort even begins. Over time, being around that kind of thinking drains emotional energy and weakens perspective. One of the quiet dangers of negativity is that it often disguises itself as realism. Negative people sometimes present themselves as just being honest or telling the truth about life. But there is a difference between wisdom and hopelessness. Wise people acknowledge difficulties while still remaining constructive. Negative people focus so heavily on problems that they lose the ability to see possibilities clearly. A calm mind requires emotional boundaries because not every voice deserves unlimited access to your thinking. Gavin Rhodes learned this lesson slowly over several years. He worked as a cybersecurity consultant in Portland, Oregon, for a technology company that managed digital security systems for large businesses. Gavin enjoyed problem-solving and genuinely cared about improving his skills. Early in his career, he was motivated, ambitious, and optimistic about his future. But the work environment around him slowly began changing his mindset. Several senior co-workers constantly complained about management, clients, the economy, and the future of the company. Conversations during breaks revolved around frustration, sarcasm, and predictions about failure. Every new opportunity was criticized before it even began. If someone succeeded, the group found reasons to dismiss it. If changes happened inside the company, they immediately assumed the worst. At first, Gavin simply listened quietly. He told himself their negativity did not affect him. But over time, he noticed subtle changes in his own thinking. He became more cynical during meetings. His enthusiasm for projects disappeared. Even outside work, he found himself complaining more and expecting disappointment automatically. The most troubling part was that Gavin no longer felt mentally peaceful. His mind remained tense and irritated almost constantly. He began assuming bad outcomes before situations even unfolded. Opportunities that once excited him now felt pointless or risky. One evening after work, Gavin met an old college friend for dinner. During their conversation, his friend noticed how negative Gavin had become and asked him a direct question: "When did you stop sounding hopeful about your life?" The question unsettled him deeply because he realized he could not remember. Over the following weeks, Gavin began paying attention to the emotional atmosphere surrounding him every day. For the first time, he saw clearly how much negativity he had absorbed simply through repeated exposure. He realized that while he could not fully control his work environment, he could control how much emotional influence he allowed it to have over his mind. Slowly, Gavin started making changes. He limited unnecessary conversations that revolved around constant complaining. During breaks, he spent more time reading, walking outside, or focusing on professional growth instead of sitting inside negative discussions. Outside work, he intentionally surrounded himself with people who were constructive, disciplined, and solution-oriented. The shift in his thinking did not happen instantly, but over time his mindset became calmer and more focused again. His motivation returned because he was no longer feeding his mind a constant diet of negativity every day. This is something many people fail to recognize. Your mind is shaped not only by what you think personally, but also by what you repeatedly hear, tolerate, and emotionally absorb from others. Negative environments quietly train the brain to focus on fear, frustration, and limitation. Peaceful environments strengthen clarity, confidence, and emotional stability. Protecting your peace sometimes requires difficult decisions. It may require stronger boundaries, less exposure to draining conversations, or greater awareness of what influences your thinking daily. Not every opinion deserves emotional space inside your mind. Not every environment deserves unlimited access to your attention. A calm mind grows stronger around people who value growth, responsibility, wisdom, and emotional balance. It becomes weaker around constant chaos, bitterness, and hopelessness. The next time you feel mentally exhausted, look carefully at the emotional atmosphere surrounding your life. Pay attention to the conversations you hear most often. Notice how certain people affect your thoughts after spending time with them. Emotional energy leaves lasting impressions whether you realize it or not. Peace is not something you accidentally keep, it is something you intentionally protect. And one of the most important ways to protect it is by becoming careful about what influences your mind every day. Chapter 12. Prepare calmly before pressure arrives. Confidence is often misunderstood. Many people think confidence is something a person either naturally possesses or lacks completely. They imagine confident people moving through life without fear, doubt, or nervousness. But true confidence is rarely built through personality alone. More often, it is built through preparation. A calm mind becomes stronger when it knows it has prepared carefully for the moment ahead. Preparation reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the greatest sources of fear. When people feel unprepared, pressure becomes heavier because the mind senses vulnerability. But when preparation exists, the mind gains stability. Calmness grows because the person trusts the work they have already done. This is why preparation is deeply connected to emotional control. Panic often appears when people realize too late that they avoided necessary preparation. Last-minute rushing creates mental chaos because the mind knows it is trying to compensate for lost time. Thoughts become scattered, focus weakens. Emotions rise quickly because pressure now feels dangerous instead of manageable. Prepared people experience pressure differently. They may still feel nervous or challenged, but underneath those emotions exists a deeper sense of steadiness. Their minds remain clearer because preparation has already created structure inside the chaos. One of the hidden benefits of preparation is that it protects the mind from emotional overload. When important tasks are organized in advance, the brain wastes less energy trying to manage uncertainty. This creates mental space for clearer thinking during stressful moments. A calm mind is not built only by learning emotional discipline after pressure arrives. It is also built by preparing wisely before pressure ever appears. Many people unknowingly create unnecessary anxiety by avoiding preparation. They delay difficult conversations. They ignore responsibilities until deadlines approach. They enter important situations mentally scattered and emotionally rushed. Then they wonder why pressure feels overwhelming. In many cases, the problem is not the situation itself. The problem is the lack of preparation before the situation arrived. Carolyn Bishop understood this struggle better than most. She worked as a courtroom interpreter in San Francisco, translating complex legal proceedings between English and Spanish during criminal and civil trials. Her work required intense concentration, quick thinking, and precision under pressure. A single mistake in translation could create serious consequences inside the courtroom. Despite her experience, Caroline secretly struggled with overwhelming anxiety before major legal proceedings. On important trial days, she often arrived feeling mentally exhausted before the work even began. Her thoughts raced constantly. She worried about making mistakes, forgetting terminology, or losing focus during difficult testimony. The pressure became especially intense during high-profile cases involving large audiences and emotionally charged situations. Her worst anxiety appeared when she felt mentally rushed or unprepared before entering the courtroom. On days when preparation felt incomplete, her mind became chaotic. One particularly stressful week changed the way she approached pressure forever. Caroline had been assigned to interpret during a complicated federal fraud case involving highly technical financial language. The volume of documents was enormous, and the legal terminology was unusually difficult. As the trial date approached, she felt panic building steadily inside her mind. But instead of avoiding the discomfort, Caroline made a deliberate decision to prepare differently than she ever had before. She reviewed terminology carefully each evening instead of cramming at the last minute. She organized detailed notes in advance. She practiced difficult vocabulary aloud repeatedly until it felt natural. Most importantly, she stopped trying to prepare emotionally through worry and started preparing practically through discipline. By the time the trial began, something inside her had changed. She still felt nervous walking into the courtroom, but the panic was gone. Beneath the pressure existed a quiet confidence because she knew she had done the work required to handle the situation. The trial lasted several weeks, and Caroline performed exceptionally well throughout the proceedings. Later, she realized something powerful. Her calmness had not appeared magically inside the courtroom. It had been built quietly during the hours of disciplined preparation beforehand. This is one of the greatest secrets behind steady confidence. Calm people often appear naturally composed from the outside, but what others do not see is the preparation happening privately behind the scenes. Preparation creates trust between you and yourself. It allows your mind to relax because it knows effort has already been invested before the pressure arrives. This principle applies to every part of life. Relationships improve when difficult conversations are approached thoughtfully instead of emotionally. Careers become less stressful when responsibilities are handled consistently instead of delayed constantly. Financial pressure decreases when planning replaces avoidance. Even personal growth becomes calmer when discipline replaces chaos. Preparation is an act of respect toward your future self. It reduces unnecessary emotional suffering because it removes much of the confusion that creates panic later. The next time you face an important challenge, do not wait for confidence to appear first. Begin preparing calmly and consistently. Organize your thoughts, practice your skills, study carefully, handle responsibilities early instead of emotionally rushing at the last moment. Often it is simply well prepared, and preparation has a quiet way of turning pressure into something far more manageable than fear first imagined. Chapter 13. Change the thoughts that shape your decisions. Every decision begins as a thought before it becomes an action. Long before people change their behavior, they first change the conversations happening quietly inside their own minds. Thoughts shape emotions, emotions influence choices, and repeated choices eventually shape an entire life. This is why mental clarity is not only about controlling reactions during pressure, it is also about becoming aware of the thinking patterns that guide daily decisions. Many people underestimate the power of internal dialogue because thoughts happen silently, yet the mind is constantly speaking. It comments on situations, predicts outcomes, interprets events, and forms opinions about personal ability. Some thoughts create confidence, discipline, and hope. Other thoughts create hesitation, insecurity, and fear. Over time, the thoughts repeated most often become the mental environment a person lives inside every day. A calm mind does not automatically believe every thought it produces. It observes thoughts carefully, because not every thought deserves trust. This matters because negative thinking patterns slowly influence decision-making in ways many people never notice. A person who constantly thinks, "I'm probably going to fail," will approach opportunities differently than someone who thinks, "I can figure this out." A person who expects rejection may speak timidly during important conversations. Someone who constantly doubts themselves may avoid taking action altogether. The mind tends to move in the direction of its strongest repeated thoughts. Repeated fear creates cautious decisions. Repeated confidence creates courageous action. Repeated negativity trains the brain to search for problems before possibilities. Eventually, these patterns become so familiar that people stop questioning them completely. One of the most important forms of emotional discipline is learning how to challenge destructive thinking before it quietly shapes your life. Mitchell Grant experienced this struggle throughout much of his professional career. He worked as a regional pharmaceutical sales director in Cleveland, Ohio, responsible for negotiating contracts and building relationships with hospitals and healthcare providers. Mitchell was knowledgeable, experienced, and respected inside his industry, but privately, he carried a constant habit of negative internal thinking that affected nearly every important interaction. He assumed clients would criticize his proposals, dismiss his ideas, or choose competitors instead. Even when preparing carefully, he walked into negotiations already expecting disappointment. Outwardly, he remained professional, but internally his thinking was filled with doubt. Over time, those thoughts began affecting his behavior in subtle but powerful ways. He spoke less confidently during presentations. He hesitated while discussing pricing. During negotiations, he sometimes compromised too quickly because he expected rejection before the conversation even fully developed. His thoughts were shaping his decisions long before the clients responded. The difficult part was that Mitchell believed he was simply being realistic. He told himself he was preparing emotionally for possible disappointment, but in reality, he was conditioning his mind to operate from fear instead of clarity. One afternoon, after losing another important contract, Mitchell had a conversation with a senior mentor inside the company. During the discussion, the mentor asked him a question that stayed with him for years afterward. He said, "Why do you walk into every room already arguing against yourself before anyone else even speaks?" The question unsettled Mitchell because he realized it was true. His mind had become his own greatest source of resistance. Over the next several months, Mitchell began paying closer attention to the way he spoke to himself internally. He noticed how automatically negative assumptions appeared before important situations. Instead of ignoring those thoughts, he started challenging them calmly. When his mind predicted rejection, he forced himself to ask whether there was actual evidence supporting that belief. When self-doubt appeared, he redirected his focus toward preparation, ability, and previous successes instead of imagined failure. The changes were gradual but powerful. Mitchell's confidence during meetings improved because his mind was no longer fighting against him internally. He communicated more clearly, negotiated more effectively, and remained calmer under pressure because his thinking became more balanced and constructive. What changed his results was not arrogance or blind positivity. It was mental awareness. He stopped allowing destructive thoughts to quietly control his behavior without examination. This is an important lesson for anyone seeking a calmer, clearer mind. Your thoughts influence your emotional state whether you realize it or not. Repeated negative thinking creates emotional tension, hesitation, and unnecessary fear. Balanced thinking creates steadiness and better judgment. That does not mean pretending life is perfect or forcing artificial positivity. Calm thinking is honest thinking. It recognizes challenges realistically without automatically turning them into disasters. It allows room for possibility instead of assuming defeat immediately. The mind becomes stronger when you stop feeding it constant doubt. Every time you challenge destructive thinking calmly, instead of automatically believing it, you create more mental freedom. Over time, new patterns begin forming. Confidence grows because the mind stops attacking itself constantly. Pay attention to the way you speak to yourself during difficult moments. Notice the assumptions your mind repeats under pressure. Ask yourself whether those thoughts are helping you think clearly or simply increasing fear unnecessarily. A calm life is built from calm thinking, and calm thinking begins with learning how to guide your inner dialogue wisely instead of allowing fear, insecurity, and negativity to control it automatically. Chapter 14. Trust yourself without needing approval. One of the quietest sources of mental pressure is the constant need for approval. Many people spend years adjusting their decisions, behavior, opinions, and even dreams around the expectations of others. They fear criticism, rejection, judgment, or disappointing people around them. As a result, they slowly lose connection with their own inner clarity. A calm mind becomes difficult to maintain when self-worth depends heavily on external validation. The reason is simple. Other people's opinions are unstable. Praise changes, approval shifts, expectations evolve constantly. If your peace depends on being accepted by everyone around you, your emotional state will always remain vulnerable to forces outside your control. This does not mean becoming selfish or ignoring wisdom from others. Healthy guidance, constructive feedback, and supportive relationships are valuable parts of life. But there is a major difference between learning from others and emotionally depending on them for permission to trust yourself. Many people silently carry the fear of being misunderstood or disapproved of. That fear influences decisions more than they realize. They stay inside careers that no longer fulfill them because they fear judgment. They remain quiet during important conversations because they fear criticism. They abandon goals because they worry about how others may respond. Over time, This constant search for approval creates emotional exhaustion because the mind is always monitoring outside reactions instead of listening inwardly. A calm person understands that no life can be lived wisely while constantly chasing universal approval. Someone will always disagree. Someone will misunderstand your intentions. Someone may criticize decisions that are completely right for your growth. Emotional independence begins when you stop expecting every choice to receive validation from everyone around you. The need for approval also weakens decision-making because it shifts attention away from truth and toward acceptance. Instead of asking, "Is this wise?" people begin asking, "Will people approve of this?" Those are not the same question. A decision can be wise and still unpopular. Some of the most important choices in life require disappointing expectations in order to remain honest with yourself. Lauren Mercer struggled deeply with this reality for much of her adult life. She worked as a documentary filmmaker in Seattle, creating independent films focused on social issues and personal stories. Lauren was talented, thoughtful, and deeply creative, but much of her work was influenced less by personal conviction and more by the desire to impress others inside her industry. Before beginning any project, she constantly worried about how critics, colleagues, and audiences would react. She analyzed trends obsessively. She shaped creative ideas around what she believed others wanted instead of what genuinely mattered to her. Even after completing projects successfully, she rarely felt peaceful because her emotional focus remained trapped inside public opinion. If criticism appeared, even small criticism, her confidence collapsed quickly. Her emotional stability rose and fell depending on how others responded to her work. Without realizing it, she had handed strangers enormous control over her peace of mind. Over time, the pressure became emotionally draining. Lauren no longer enjoyed the creative process itself because her mind constantly anticipated judgment before the work was even finished. She began doubting her instincts, over-editing projects endlessly, and avoiding creative risks altogether. Everything changed during the production of a small documentary project that initially received very little public attention. Unlike previous work, Lauren created this film based entirely on a subject she personally cared about deeply, rather than industry expectations. She approached the project honestly without obsessing over approval. For the first time in years, she felt calm while working. The experience forced her to confront something uncomfortable. She realized how much creative energy and emotional peace she had sacrificed trying to satisfy people whose approval would never remain permanent anyway. From that point forward, Lauren began making decisions differently. She still listened to feedback, but she stopped treating outside opinions as the ultimate authority over her self-worth. She trusted her judgment more. She accepted that criticism was unavoidable. Most importantly, she stopped abandoning her inner clarity simply to avoid disappointing others. As her emotional dependence on approval weakened, her confidence became steadier. Ironically, her work also improved because it became more authentic and focused instead of emotionally scattered by outside expectations. This is an important lesson for anyone seeking a calmer mind. Emotional dependence on approval creates constant internal tension because your peace becomes controlled by opinions you cannot fully manage. A calm life requires stronger internal foundations than praise alone can provide. You cannot think clearly while constantly adjusting yourself for acceptance. The mind becomes divided between what it truly believes and what it hopes others will approve of. Over time, that inner conflict creates emotional exhaustion. Trusting yourself does not mean believing you are always right. It means developing enough inner stability to make thoughtful decisions without emotionally collapsing every time someone disagrees. It means respecting your values, judgment, and intuition while remaining open to growth. The next time you feel pressure to seek approval before making an important decision, pause and ask yourself an honest question. Are you choosing based on wisdom or based on fear of judgment? A calm mind does not require universal validation to remain steady. It listens carefully, learns humbly, and grows continuously, but it no longer surrenders its peace to every opinion surrounding it. Chapter 15. Build a mind that stays calm for life. A calm mind is not built in a single moment. It is built gradually through daily choices, repeated habits, emotional discipline, and the willingness to think clearly when life becomes difficult. Calmness is not something people either naturally possess or permanently lack. It is a skill, and like every skill, it grows stronger through practice. Throughout life, pressure will continue appearing in different forms. Some seasons will test your patience, others will test your courage, emotional stability, or ability to recover from disappointment. Unexpected problems will arrive without warning. Difficult people will challenge your peace. Fear will sometimes try to control your decisions. None of these realities can be avoided completely. The goal is not to create a life without pressure. The goal is to create a mind that remains steady within it. This is one of the most important truths to understand about mental strength. Calmness is not the absence of difficulty. Calmness is the ability to stay grounded while difficulty is present. Many people spend years searching for peace in external circumstances. They tell themselves they will finally feel calm once life becomes easier, once money improves, once stress disappears, or once everything feels predictable. But life rarely remains perfectly stable for long. New responsibilities appear, relationships change, careers evolve, uncertainty continues. A peaceful life cannot depend entirely on perfect conditions, because perfect conditions do not exist permanently. Real calmness comes from inner stability rather than external control. A steady mind understands that emotions will rise and fall naturally. Fear may appear before important decisions. Frustration may surface during stressful seasons. Sadness may follow loss or disappointment. Calmness does not mean becoming emotionally numb. It means refusing to let temporary emotions control permanent decisions. This is why emotional discipline matters so deeply. Every chapter of your life is shaped by the quality of your thinking during difficult moments. A rushed emotional decision can create years of regret. An uncontrolled reaction can damage relationships permanently. Fear can quietly steal opportunities long before failure ever arrives. But a calm mind sees clearly enough to avoid many of those unnecessary mistakes. People who remain calm under pressure often appear different from everyone around them. While others panic, they slow down. While others react emotionally, they observe carefully. While others become consumed by fear, they focus on what can still be controlled. This steadiness creates enormous advantages in leadership, relationships, business, parenting, health, and personal growth. Calm people are easier to trust because their emotions do not constantly create instability. They make wiser decisions because pressure does not immediately overwhelm their thinking. They recover faster after setbacks because they understand that difficult moments are temporary. Over time, calmness becomes a quiet form of strength that influences every area of life. One of the greatest benefits of a calm mind is perspective. Emotion often narrows attention until problems feel larger than they truly are. Calmness widens perspective again. It reminds you that many stressful moments are temporary chapters, not permanent endings. It helps you separate what truly matters from what only feels urgent emotionally. This perspective becomes especially important during modern life because the world constantly encourages emotional overstimulation. News cycles reward outrage. Social media rewards comparison and reaction. Many environments reward speed more than wisdom. In such a world, remaining calm becomes an act of discipline. It requires conscious effort to protect your attention, regulate your emotions, and think independently instead of absorbing the emotional chaos surrounding you. A calm mind also creates freedom. When you are no longer controlled by fear, anger, insecurity, or constant approval seeking, your decisions become clearer and more intentional. You stop reacting automatically to every emotional impulse. You begin choosing responses based on wisdom rather than temporary feelings. This does not happen perfectly every day. Even emotionally disciplined people experience moments of stress, frustration, and emotional struggle. The difference is that they return to calmness faster. They recognize emotional chaos before it fully controls them. They pause, reflect, and regain perspective instead of allowing emotions to lead blindly. That is the lifelong practice of mental calmness. Not perfection, but awareness. Not emotional suppression, but emotional mastery. As you move forward in life, remember that your mind is one of your greatest responsibilities. The quality of your thinking affects the quality of your decisions, relationships, leadership, and future. Protect your peace carefully. Slow down when pressure rises. Separate facts from fear. Prepare before challenges arrive. Learn to recover after setbacks. Trust yourself enough to remain steady even when circumstances feel uncertain. A calm mind is not weak, passive, or fragile. It is disciplined, it is patient, it is observant, it is resilient. And in a world filled with emotional noise, confusion, and pressure, the person who learns to remain calm will always possess a quiet advantage that few people truly understand. Conclusion. A calm mind is one of the greatest advantages a person can carry through life. In a world filled with pressure, distraction, emotional noise, and constant urgency, the ability to remain mentally steady has become increasingly rare. Yet the people who think clearly during difficult moments are often the ones who lead more wisely, recover more quickly, build stronger relationships, and make better decisions over time. Throughout this audiobook, you have seen how emotional reactions can cloud judgment and how calmness creates clarity. You have learned the importance of slowing down before making decisions, separating facts from emotional assumptions, staying present instead of becoming trapped inside fear or regret, and protecting your mind from unnecessary mental chaos. You have seen how silence restores clarity, how preparation creates confidence, and how emotional discipline protects both your peace and your future. These lessons are not temporary techniques, they are lifelong practices. Calmness is not built through one perfect moment of control. It is built gradually, through repeated awareness, patience, and self-discipline. Every time you pause before reacting emotionally, you strengthen your mind. Every time you choose clarity instead of panic, you create greater emotional stability. Every time you refuse to let fear or negativity control your decisions, you become mentally stronger. Life will continue testing you. Stressful situations will still appear. Unexpected problems will still arrive without warning. There will still be moments when emotions rise quickly and pressure feels overwhelming. But the goal is no longer to avoid every difficult situation. The goal is to become the kind of person who remains steady within those situations. A calm mind does not guarantee a perfect life, but it dramatically improves the way you move through life. It allows you to think instead of panic. It allows you to respond instead of react. It gives you the ability to step back from emotional chaos long enough to make wiser decisions. One of the most important things to remember is that pressure reveals habits that already exist beneath the surface. When life becomes difficult, people do not suddenly become calm by accident. Calmness comes from the habits they have practiced repeatedly beforehand. It comes from emotional awareness, disciplined thinking, healthy boundaries, preparation, reflection, and self-control practiced quietly over time. This means your daily mental habits matter more than you may realize. The way you speak to yourself matters. The people you surround yourself with matter. The thoughts you repeatedly entertain matter. The emotional reactions you allow to continue unchecked matter. Small patterns eventually shape the condition of your mind. Protect your peace carefully. Not every problem deserves your panic. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every emotional impulse deserves immediate action. Learn to slow down enough to think clearly before life pushes you into reactions you later regret. There is tremendous power in becoming emotionally steady while the world around you remains chaotic. Calm people carry a kind of quiet strength that others naturally trust and respect. They are not controlled easily by fear, pressure, or emotional confusion because they have learned how to lead themselves first. As you continue forward after this audiobook, remember that the quality of your life will often depend on the quality of your thinking during difficult moments. Anyone can remain calm when life feels easy. True growth appears when calmness survives pressure. Your mind can become your greatest source of strength if you learn how to guide it wisely. Be patient with yourself as you practice these principles. Mental discipline is not built overnight, but every small step toward greater calmness creates a stronger foundation for your future. The world will always contain noise, pressure, uncertainty, and emotional distraction, but within all of that chaos, you still have the ability to choose clarity. You still have the ability to choose patience. You still have the ability to remain steady when others lose control. And often that calmness will become the very thing that changes the direction of your life.